Something is happening inside the US military apparatus this week. Something that shows Washington no longer considers the war with Iran over, even though a ceasefire still exists on paper. The Pentagon is preparing to rename this war, from Operation Epic Fury to Operation Sledgehammer. And the scariest part is not the new name, because this is not about branding. This is not about media. This is legal architecture, a calculated move to restart the war clock, create legal runway for an entirely new phase of attacks, and send a signal. America is preparing for the possibility of returning to full-scale war. And while that preparation is underway, Iran is not sitting still. They are attacking the UAE and Kuwait during the ceasefire. They are deploying reconnaissance aircraft in Pakistan. They are expanding their declared control over the Strait of Hormuz by 10 times. Meanwhile, the UAE and Saudi Arabia, for the first time in history, have secretly launched direct attacks on Iranian territory. The nuclear submarine USS Alaska has appeared publicly at Gibraltar. The Pentagon has just signed a contract to replenish the only bomb capable of penetrating Iran's deepest underground bunkers. And Trump has just landed in Beijing to meet the person holding the biggest leverage against Tehran. All of this is happening simultaneously, and all of it is connected. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you will understand exactly why each side is doing what they are doing, what logic is driving the entire situation, and if Operation Sledgehammer really activates, what it will look like. Let's begin. Let's begin with what is really happening. On May 13, Trump stood in the Oval Office and called Iran's latest peace proposal garbage. Not enough. Not needs further consideration. Garbage. He did not read it all. He did not discuss it. And when asked if the ceasefire was still in effect, the verbatim answer was, "I would say it's one of the weakest right now. It's on life support." 2 days earlier, he used even stronger language, calling the ceasefire in a state of massive life support, calling Iran's proposal totally unacceptable and stupid. To understand why these statements are more important than just ordinary diplomatic rhetoric, you need to know the context. The ceasefire was mediated by Pakistan starting April 8, but from the beginning it was not a real ceasefire. Iran rejected the entire 45-day ceasefire framework proposed by Pakistan, instead offering its own 10-point proposal with conditions America could not accept. Since then, the ceasefire has been continuously violated by both sides, and when Iran sent its official response to the US proposal through Pakistani mediators, Trump immediately rejected it. This is the context to understand why the NBC News report on May 12 is so important. NBC confirmed from 2 US officials that the Pentagon is actively discussing renaming the campaign from Operation Epic Fury to Operation Sledgehammer, specifically in the scenario where the ceasefire collapses and Trump orders a return to large-scale combat. Notably, Rubio has publicly declared Epic Fury over and the administration has notified Congress, but the Pentagon continues to use that name in official communiques, as if the war had never really stopped. There is a very specific legal reason behind the name change. The War Powers Resolution of 1973 requires the President to notify Congress within 48 hours of the start of hostilities, and if Congress does not authorize, the military must withdraw within 60 days. A campaign with a new name technically restarts that clock from the beginning, creating legal runway to continue operations without having to return to Congress immediately. This is how the Pentagon is arming itself legally for the next war. And while those discussions are taking place, US forces in the region are not shrinking, they are expanding. 2 carrier strike groups, 1 Marine Expeditionary Unit, hundreds of fighter jets including F-35, F-15E, and F-16CJ, larger than the force deployed at the start of Epic Fury. And on May 11, the US dispatched the Ohio-class nuclear submarine USS Alaska to Gibraltar, in one of the extremely rare occasions a strategic ballistic missile submarine appears publicly, with a 200-meter exclusion zone and Royal Marines deployed for protection. Strategic submarines are designed for secrecy, not public presence. When one of them appears publicly at one of the most strategically important points in the world, that is a deliberate nuclear deterrent signal being sent, and Tehran knows exactly what that message means. But to understand why this ceasefire is dying, you need to understand that Iran is not failing in negotiations. Iran is doing exactly what they planned. While Iranian officials publicly declare victory in front of domestic television cameras, the reality is Iran is losing $500 million every day. Its naval capabilities have been devastated after Operation Epic Fury, and it has no significant strategic cards left except a fleet of fast attack boats and the threat to close Hormuz. Those victory declarations are not delusion, they are pure domestic information tactics designed to maintain morale at home and avoid political collapse. And when you understand that, you will start reading Iran's peace proposal in a completely different way. Let's look at what Iran actually proposed. War reparations from the US, lifting of all sanctions, preservation of uranium enrichment rights, lifting of the blockade, withdrawal of US troops from the region, and no verification mechanisms whatsoever. None of these have any chance of being accepted by America, and Iran knows it. This is not a proposal designed to reach an agreement. This is a document designed to be rejected because Iran's real goal is not to end the war but to buy time without being bombed, preserve remaining assets, and allow economic pressure from Hormuz chaos to build up long enough to create political leverage. And during that time, Iran is not sitting still, because while negotiators are exchanging documents through Pakistani mediators, the IRGC is acting on the ground. On May 1, 6 armed IRGC members infiltrated Kuwait's Bubiyan Island by rented fishing boat, clashed with Kuwait forces resulting in 1 Kuwaiti soldier wounded, 4 IRGC members captured and 2 fled. Kuwait announced the incident on May 12, summoned the Iranian ambassador, and declared it a blatant violation of national sovereignty, while reserving the right to self-defense under Article 51 of the UN Charter. This happened during the ceasefire period. This is not a war that has stopped. This is a war that is continuing in other ways, less visible but no less dangerous. And what happened next is even more noteworthy. The UAE, the country that has endured more than 550 ballistic missiles and more than 2,200 drones from Iran since the conflict began, has not only defended. In early April, the UAE secretly dispatched Mirage 2000 fighters to directly attack the Lavon Island oil refinery on Iranian territory. This is the first time in history a Gulf nation has directly attacked Iranian soil, a threshold that had existed for decades crossed without any official statement. Saudi Arabia has also crossed that threshold. Reuters cited 2 Western officials and 2 Iranian officials, confirming that the Saudi Air Force conducted multiple secret strikes on Iranian territory in late March. The first time in history, Riyadh directly attacked Iranian soil as retaliation for previous Iranian attacks on Saudi Arabia. All of this is happening while the ceasefire is still in effect on paper. On May 12, IRGC Navy Rear Admiral Mohammad Akbarzadeh, a veteran officer gradually transitioning to a politico-military role, officially confirmed that Iran has expanded operations in the Strait of Hormuz. Not expanded a little, not a minor adjustment, 10 times. The old definition of the Strait of Hormuz is a 21 nautical mile choke point around Hormuz and Hanam Islands, the narrowest point of the world's most important waterway. Iran's new definition is a massive crescent-shaped area stretching from Jaz in the east to Siri Island in the west, covering 200 to 300 nautical miles of sea. To understand what that number means in practice, remember that 1/5 of the world's oil is trapped in this area. World oil prices have surged since the conflict began, and commercial shipping traffic through here has dropped to a trickle compared to normal times. That is the enormous economic leverage Iran is holding, and they have just declared that their control over that leverage is 10 times larger than what the world once thought. But here is the deadly paradox that Iran's declaration hides. In the context of a dying ceasefire, Iran is escalating with geographic language instead of weapons. When Iran declares control over a sea area 10 times larger, they are not only expanding the scope of their declared power, they are expanding the list of legitimate targets for the American side. Every naval base, every fast attack boat deployment point, every radar station, every command and control facility within that crescent area becomes a potential target if Operation Sledgehammer activates. Iran has just redrawn the target map for the B-1 Lancer and F-15E Strike Eagle themselves, and they did it with their own declaration. The message Iran wants to send is, we are not negotiating to concede, we are negotiating to strengthen our position. But the message US military planners are receiving is the complete opposite. Iran has just given the Pentagon a target list 10 times longer for free. So with what remains after Operation Epic Fury, what can Iran really do? Iran's naval capability has been devastated at the strategic level after Epic Fury. What remains is not a navy in the conventional sense of the word. No destroyers, no escorts capable of real combat, no major naval infrastructure left intact. What remains is an asymmetric strategy built from the surviving fragments, and the center of that strategy is what analysts call the Mosquito Fleet. From 500 to 1,000 fast attack boats of the IRGC Navy dispersed across ports along the Iranian coast, many of which are dual-use ports, meaning shared civilian and military ports, making identifying and attacking them much more complicated than a conventional naval base. The tactic of these boats is to approach US carriers and destroyers at a distance that large defense systems are not designed to handle effectively, exploiting C-802 missiles, derivatives from Chinese technology, or simpler, loaded with explosives and remotely controlled like suicide boats. Combined with coastal drone swarms launched from those dual-use ports, this is a threat that cannot be completely eliminated by airstrikes alone. Iran's strategic goal with the Mosquito Fleet is not to sink the US fleet, they know that's impossible. The goal is to hit a US warship. Just one successful strike on a destroyer or, in Iran's best-case scenario, a carrier, would be a huge psychological victory domestically and internationally, creating the negotiating leverage that Tehran desperately needs. To understand why the IRGC Navy, not Artesh, Iran's regular army, is leading this strategy, you need to understand the power architecture inside Iran. Artesh is the regular military force established before the revolution, and precisely for that reason, the Ayatollah never fully trusted Artesh ideologically. The IRGC was created right after the revolution exactly to address that issue, a force loyal politically first, militarily second, reporting directly to the supreme leader rather than through the normal chain of command. General Salami is currently playing the role of bridge between these two power structures, but in any power system under extreme pressure, the bridge position is always the most dangerous, because when everything collapses, the one in the middle is the first to be blamed by both sides. And while all this is happening on the military front, there is a recent intelligence detail that raises questions about what Iran is preparing at the information level. Satellite images confirm that an Iranian Air Force RC-130, the electronic reconnaissance variant of the C-130 transport aircraft that Iran received from the US before relations between the two countries collapsed, is parked at Nurkan Air Base. just kilometers from Pakistan's capital Islamabad. The RC-130 is not a fighter jet, it is ears and eyes, designed to collect electronic signals, map enemy radar spectra, and track communication flows. The strategic question is not what that plane is doing, the question is why Iran chose Pakistan, precisely the country acting as a peace mediator between the US and Iran, as the deployment location for their electronic intelligence assets. The answer to that question lies partly in what the Pentagon is doing, and what they are doing is not preparing for peace. The U.S. Air Force has just awarded Boeing a contract worth over $100 million to replenish the stock of GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator, the 30,000-pound bunker buster bomb, the only weapon in the U.S. arsenal capable of penetrating Iran's deepest reinforced underground facilities, and the only weapon large enough that only the B-2 Spirit can carry it. This is exactly the type of bomb that was used against Iran's most fortified nuclear facilities in Operation Midnight Hammer. The timing of this contract, appearing in the same week the Pentagon is discussing Operation Sledgehammer, is not a random coincidence. The US is replenishing precisely the type of weapon designed to do one specific thing: punch through what remains underground in Iran, and that is not the only signal being sent. Just days ago, CENTCOM publicly posted images of B-1 Lancers conducting training missions in the region. This is not information shared by accident. CENTCOM does not post images of strategic bombers on social media for aesthetic reasons. This is visual deterrence, a message sent to Tehran without needing any official statement, because anyone in the Iranian military apparatus knows exactly what the B-1 Lancer carries and what it can do. To fully understand the picture of what is being positioned, look at the entire array of assets. The B-2 Spirit combined with the GBU-57 is the package for the deepest and most fortified bunker targets, things no other weapon in the US arsenal can reach. The B-1 Lancer carrying the 5,000-pound GBU-72 is the package for mid-tier targets, underground facilities along Hormuz, drone depots, IRGC Navy command nodes along exactly the crescent area that Iran has just declared expanded. The F-15E Strike Eagle with maximum payload takes on the flexible multi-role mission. And the F-16CJ is what few people talk about but is indispensable in any campaign like this, specialized in SEAD, meaning suppression of enemy air defenses, flying deliberately into enemy air defense fire as bait, triggering Iran's SAM systems, collecting radar frequencies in real time, then using anti-radiation missiles to destroy them or passing data to other weapons. The courage of those F-16CJ pilots, flying into kill zones to gather electronic data, knowing their purpose is to be targeted, cannot be underestimated. Overseeing all of that is the RC-135, the electronic reconnaissance platform feeding real-time intelligence to the entire force. This is a pattern seen before RC-135 operating heavily around Venezuela right before the Venezuela campaign began, and its appearance in an area is always a sign that a campaign may not be far off. And while the US is positioning those assets, allies are joining in. French Navy Admiral Thibault Dupont has confirmed that France is preparing to deploy Tiger attack helicopters to frigates near Hormuz, after the Tiger proved its effectiveness directly with 30mm cannon and 20 rocket pods in anti-Iranian drone tests in the UAE. This is the low-cost defense layer that fills exactly the gap that large naval air defense systems are not designed to handle: small, low-flying, high-volume drones. France's Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier has also transited the Suez Canal into the Middle East. A coalition is forming, and it is forming around a specific scenario that we are about to discuss. That specific scenario is what and why the name Sledgehammer matters more than you think. Some Pentagon officials believe Operation Epic Fury never really ended. Rubio may have declared it over. The administration may have notified Congress. But the Pentagon continues to use that name in official communiques, because from the perspective of military planners, what happened was not the end of a war, but a pause in major strikes while waiting to see what Iran would do next. Sledgehammer, if it happens, will not be a continuation of Epic Fury. It will be an escalation. Epic Fury destroyed Iran's combat capabilities: warships, radars, air defense systems, major nuclear facilities. Sledgehammer, as the name itself suggests, is designed to crush what remains, not combat capability, but the power infrastructure, the things that allow the IRGC and Iran's leadership to continue operating as an organized entity. This is the difference between weakening and crushing, and it changes the entire logic of the campaign. To understand what Sledgehammer would look like in practice, you need to understand the concept of the kill chain, that is, the sequential logic of a modern airstrike campaign, in which each wave creates conditions for the next wave, and no step can be skipped without increasing risk to the entire campaign. The first phase, before any weapons are launched, is continuous reconnaissance. RC-135s are operating to map Iran's remaining air defense system, identifying SAM site locations, command nodes, and underground facilities along Hormuz. But the most important task of this phase is to distinguish real bunkers from fake bunkers, because Iran knows very well that the GBU-57 is an extremely expensive and hard-to-produce strategic asset, and they have built numerous fake bunkers across the territory with the sole purpose of making the US waste those bombs on empty targets. This is why reconnaissance is not a preparatory step. Reconnaissance is a prerequisite for the entire campaign. The first wave belongs to the F-16CJs in the SEAD role. Those F-16CJs fly in first, not to attack but to be targeted, provoking Iran's remaining SAM systems to fire, revealing their positions and radar frequencies, after which anti-radiation missiles destroy those systems before they can reposition. This is an indispensable opening step. Because if Iran's air defense grid is not broken first, everything that follows faces the risk of being shot down. The second wave is the mission of the B-2 Spirit and GBU-57, targeting the remaining nuclear facilities after Midnight Hammer, the deepest underground command centers, targets that Epic Fury could not penetrate or fully destroy. This is the wave that no other weapon in the US arsenal can execute. Only the B-2 with GBU-57 combination has the capability to penetrate the depth and fortification of those targets. And the third wave is the mission of the B-1 Lancer carrying the GBU-72, targeting precisely what Iran just put on the target list itself when it declared the Hormuz expansion. Coastal underground drone facilities, missile depots, IRGC Navy command and control points along the Crescent area from Jas to Siri Island, along with the dual-use ports where the Mosquito fleet is concentrated, missile production facilities, and the mine-laying infrastructure controlling Hormuz. The priority target list for Sledgehammer, in other words, is everything that allows Iran to continue threatening the world's most important waterway, and everything that allows Iran's leadership to continue issuing orders and controlling their forces. This is not a punitive campaign. This is a campaign to eliminate operational capability. And the strategy behind that sequence reflects a lesson the Pentagon has learned over decades. None of these waves can achieve its objective if the previous wave does not complete its task first. That is why the GBU-57 contract, the CENTCOM B-1 images, the appearance of the USS Alaska at Gibraltar, and the RC-135s operating in the area are all pieces of the same picture. A picture that the Pentagon is putting together piece by piece, while Tehran is still sitting at the negotiating table with Pakistan as mediator. And while the Pentagon is assembling those pieces, Trump has just landed in Beijing, and this trip carries the shadow of Iran heavier than any official agenda. Trump arrived in Beijing for a summit with Xi Jinping, the first visit by a US president to China since 2017, originally planned for March but postponed because the Iran war broke out. The delegation accompanying Trump includes Elon Musk, Apple's Tim Cook, Larry Fink, Boeing's Kelly Ortberg, and more than a dozen top Wall Street CEOs, along with Rubio and Hegseth, a rare combination of economic and military power in any single trip. The official agenda includes trade, AI export controls, semiconductors, rare earths, and Taiwan, with $25 billion in US weapons just approved for the island hanging over the negotiating table. But everyone in the room knows what is really dominating this meeting. Trump said bluntly on Air Force One he would have a long talk about Iran with Xi, and his message to Tehran through that channel is, we're either going to make a deal or they're going to be decimated, one way or the other. We win. To understand why China is the decisive variable in this entire situation, you need to understand one number. China buys more than 80% of Iran's exported oil. No country outside the United States holds greater economic leverage over Tehran, and Beijing knows it well. China has been noted as having helped persuade Iran to accept the April ceasefire, but has remained completely silent about that role. The Iran war has given Xi Jinping a type of leverage he did not expect to have at the beginning of this year. Trump needs China to pressure Tehran, and Xi knows exactly how much that is worth when trading for concessions on trade, semiconductors, and Taiwan. The US wants China to cut off supplies of optical seekers and high-resolution satellite imagery to Iran, things that are helping the IRGC target more accurately, and to pressure Tehran to reopen Hormuz. In return, there could be a US-China oil deal. If relations improve enough, China could start buying US oil. A step that resolves the trade imbalance Washington has endured for a long time, where the US depends on Chinese goods while China refuses to buy US oil. That is the architecture of the negotiations in Beijing. But meanwhile, Pakistan, the country playing the role of mediator for the highest-level US-Iran talks since 1979, is raising a completely different question. Because while Pakistan is hosting those talks, satellite images confirm that an Iranian RC-130 reconnaissance aircraft is parked at Nurkan Base, just kilometers from the capital Islamabad. Pakistan is playing both sides, or at least turning a blind eye to Iran using its territory as an electronic intelligence platform, even as Islamabad presents itself to the world as a neutral mediator. That means every agreement, every proposal, every response going through the Pakistan channel needs to be read with a much higher degree of skepticism than its surface suggests. And it explains in part why, even as Pakistan hosts the highest level talks in nearly 50 years, the gap between the two sides has not narrowed. So what will happen next? Based on everything we have just gone through, there are two most likely scenarios in the next 72 to 96 hours, and both are not particularly good for anyone hoping for a quick diplomatic solution. The first scenario is the ceasefire continues to drag on, not because the two sides are getting closer to an agreement, but because both are using this time to prepare for what comes next. Iran continues to buy time, accumulate what it can still accumulate, and wait to see what the Trump-Xi summit brings. The US continues to replenish weapons, position forces, and refine the target list. This is a temporary stable state. Both sides have reasons not to escalate immediately, but it is not sustainable, because every day the ceasefire exists without real progress is a day the gap between the two sides widens a little more. The second scenario is Operation Sledgehammer activates, and the trigger could come from many different directions. An Iranian attack on U.S. assets in the region. An event in Hormuz that crosses a threshold Trump cannot ignore politically. Or simply the complete collapse of the Pakistani diplomatic channel when there is nothing left to negotiate. Iran has already sent signals about its own escalation potential by issuing a direct warning that any attack on an Iranian oil tanker will lead to a heavy strike on one of the U.S. centers in the region, and that is a statement from a side trying to project strength, while in reality its options are gradually narrowing. What determines which scenario plays out lies in 4 variables. First, the outcome of the Trump-Xi summit. If China agrees to cut intelligence support to Iran and actually pressures Tehran to return to the negotiating table with a more substantive position, the ceasefire could be extended long enough to create a deal. If Xi chooses to use the Iran leverage to trade for concessions on Taiwan and semiconductors without actually acting, the second scenario becomes significantly closer. Second, the speed at which Iran continues to lose $500 million every day. There is a financial breaking point somewhere in that curve, and when it arrives, Iran's leadership will have to choose between substantive concessions or desperate escalation. Third, the UAE and Saudi Arabia, the 2 countries that have already crossed the historic threshold by directly attacking Iranian territory for the first time, whether they will continue to escalate, and if so, how Iran will respond. Fourth, and most important, whether Iran is making the same miscalculation it made on February 28, believing that Trump will not actually do what he says until he does. The only thing certain in this entire situation is this: the gap between what Iran is proposing and what the U.S. can accept is not narrowing, it is widening. U.S. forces in the region are increasing, not decreasing. The USS Alaska at Gibraltar, the GBU-57 contract, the CENTCOM B-1 images, the Charles de Gaulle transiting Suez, these signals are not being sent into the void. They are being sent to Tehran, and every day that passes without a substantive response from the Iranian side makes Operation Sledgehammer less hypothetical and more real. If you want to continue following every development of this conflict, weapons, strategy, and real analysis behind the headlines, subscribe to the channel. We will continue to update every development as it happens.